Hello, welcome everybody. Hopefully you can hear me, which means you'll also be able to hear Suzanne. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes, give people a chance to join. Yeah, it looks like we have a good number of people already on, so maybe okay to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the 5th event in the MediLedger webinar series, talking through the future of the MediLedger Network today and how business partners can do business together, sort of the future of the pharma, life science, and healthcare industry. I'm going to hand this off to Suzanne in a moment. Just a couple of admin points. We have muted everyone automatically just for the sake of the group. There is a Q&A tool in Zoom. It should be at the bottom there, and there's a button and you can actually pose questions during the webinar. And I'll make sure they're sort of included at the soonest possible opportunity. There will also be a designated Q&A section at the end. But yeah, plenty of opportunities to ask questions and engage. And I'll be here if you have any specific concerns or questions as well. You can also reach me in the chat. You can just direct it to all panelists. I think with that, I'll go ahead and hand it off to Suzanne. Go ahead, take it over.
Thanks, Mike. And thanks everybody for joining our webinar today. In our previous webinars, we've talked a little bit about MediLedger and some of our solutions. And today we wanted to take a step back and cover, I think, some of the questions of why this architecture and construct really matters. So we're going to start today talking about the MediLedger Network, give you a brief overview, and then really talk about the capabilities it enables at a business level. We're then going to take some time to walk through the real-life examples of how these capabilities have come together to solve real business problems and to highlight the fact that it's solving those problems today. This is not a technology for the future, it's happening right now. And then we want to take a little time to explore other use cases in the industry that we think can really benefit from a blockchain-based solution as well. So thank you guys all for joining. As Mike said, if you have any questions, just pose them along the way. Mike will interrupt me if it's poignant to talk, or we can certainly take the questions at the end. So we wanted to start again with an overview of MediLedger and how we've designed the network and the solution along with the capabilities. So some of you may have seen this before, and if you haven't, let me just walk you through. The MediLedger Network is designed as a permissioned network that runs in a decentralized fashion. Companies are onboarded with their identities, and their identities are stored on the blockchain. That process today happens manually, though I do know there's some exciting work in the blockchain space to have credentialing services that can have that happen automatically. Until then, we'll do it manually. But we onboard the companies, and then as a company, as you can see in the white square there, could run a node in the network. That means that they'll run servers and the infrastructure, and that node then has a couple of connections in the network. First, it has a connection to the blockchain ledger. This is a shared ledger amongst all the companies participating in the network. And anything that is posted to that blockchain ledger is shared with all parties, so everyone has an identical copy. By putting their identity, we also now have the blue square, which enables private messaging between a company and any other company that's in the network. No point-to-point integrations required. So this is the high-level construct of how the solution is designed, and it's this combination of blockchain-based transactions that are shared with everyone and private messaging between parties that creates the basis of the architecture of the technology, and which enables the capabilities now that are possible in this unique construct. So what are those new capabilities? If we think from high level that the aim is to automate the transactions between trading partners, we've thought a lot about what capabilities this architectural construct enables that allows business problems to be solved in ways that weren't possible before. So I'll start with what I brought up earlier. We onboard companies based on their identity. All the participants in the network are known. So you actually have a source of a verified trading partner. The system is designed that no one can come in and fake being someone else. So when you are getting information or messages from that company, you know that that's who you're getting the messages from. You know who you're sending messages to. So the verified trading partner is the first aspect, a very core aspect of a capability that becomes super important as you're looking at data exchange and transaction exchange for really core business processes. That identity also now enables this real-time private messaging. We use libp2p as our messaging protocol, but effectively, if you could imagine, this enables secure messaging between parties. It is private. No one can see that those messages are taking place. Even Chronicled, that is designing the software, doesn't have any access to companies' private data and would not as well have visibility to this private messaging that's happening. So all those transactions that are taking place on that blue line can now happen real time and completely private. So, and that privacy can be assured. The next component and capability that becomes possible is perfect data alignment. So again, if we think back to the basics of a blockchain, data that or transactions that are posted to a blockchain are checked against rules that it's valid, that consensus is done, and then the data or transactions are propagated to all the other nodes in the network. So you can be assured by design that any data that's shared there is aligned with everyone else, and that all the trading partners you're working with are looking and working from the exact same source of data that you have. That knowledge that you're operating from the same data is actually really important, and we've identified pain points in the past where that isn't the case. So this perfect data alignment becomes a really exciting capability that can fix a lot of business problems. The next capability is the fact that the records and the rules are unchangeable by any individual party. By the fact that our solution is running decentralized, if you can imagine every company is hosting a node in their own infrastructure or a cloud solution of their choice, it would become very quickly difficult to impossible for companies to collude together and change any records or logic. Certainly, if the entire network felt it was important to change, there are examples of that in the Ethereum blockchain network, they could make that choice to make a change. But in principle, the way these business processes are operating, it provides a record that no individual company or even small set of companies on their own can change, even the records that they had posted. And this will also apply with business rule logic that's put on the nodes as well. No one can change the logic independently. So hence, the records can be trusted and the business rules can be trusted that no one can change them without anyone else being aware of that. And that goes to actually one of the most exciting capabilities that becomes possible is business rule enforcement between companies. We're going to talk through some great examples, but in today's world, there are a lot of contract arrangements that are made between parties, and those rules actually have to be enforced almost on a gentleman agreement level. You're doing the business with each other, and when someone doesn't follow the rules, it takes a follow-up phone call or discussion enabled to enforce that. We can actually fully automate those business rules. Companies agree upon what those rules are. Frankly, they're often written into legal contracts, so they're not really intended to be contentious, and we can let the systems do the rule enforcement for us. And finally, data and business privacy. We've designed the MediLedger Network for broad industry adoption, and from the very beginning, we understood that would mean competitors and trading partners are in the network together, and no one from an enterprise level would consider it viable to be in a network where any of their data is leaked or shared. Now, interestingly, a lot of companies on this call are probably using third-party solution providers who frankly hold the data for you, but they also sometimes have business interests to share, aggregate, or sell that data back. What we think is so exciting about the MediLedger Network and the capability is that all the transactions are happening peer-to-peer, directly between one company and another. There is no more third party that sits in between. And this enables very private data exchange, and we've made assurances in the architecture and the design of our solutions that no business intelligence or data privacy is leaked to any other participants in the network. So these 6 capabilities, maybe you guys can even think of more, are exciting tenets, and we wanted to use today to describe, again, at a real basic level, how these new capabilities have actually been enabled in the solutions we've built to date to solve business problems, because we believe by describing our existing solutions, it will probably trigger for you other business problems you have today that could be solved now that these capabilities can exist. When we think about this, it really is like you can put your company behind your trading partner's firewall and enforce the rules before the data even comes to you. So if you've listened to our webinars before, you've heard business problems like, is this product authentic? Is the rebate accurate? Are these the right raw materials? Are they coming from the right source? All of these are questions that today you either have to rely on the trust of your trading partner, or you spend time auditing and managing disputes. All of this we think can now move to industry-wide automation by defining the rules between companies, ensuring that your rules are met before any transactions or data come to you, and really, I would say, provide exciting closed-loop automation between companies in a secure fashion. So I now wanted to jump to talk about real-life examples of how these capabilities are solving business problems today. And I'm aware that some of you on the call are familiar with our solutions, others aren't. So I'm going to take a little time to walk through the solutions that we built to then be able to describe how these capabilities are being used to help solve the problems. Our first solution is our product verification system. Some of you on the call may be familiar. The Drug Supply Chain Security Act in the United States is a law that has requirements stemming from 2013 all the way to 2023 that will improve the security of drugs in the US supply chain. There are other laws in other parts of the world that are slightly nuanced in difference, and our solution initially focuses solely on the United States law. One component of that law is that all drugs returned to wholesalers are going to need to be verified before they're allowed to be resold. This law will take effect this November, and it represents over 2% of all drugs sold in the United States. What it was going to require, maybe to comment, the industry had done a lot of work to create specifications of how this solution can work, and the solution providers, including MediLedger Network, have complied with those specifications so that this can be interoperable. This isn't just one solution provider who can do this. But the requirements that came out of those specifications required that item numbers of products sold in the United States would need to be shared amongst parties that could enable verification routing. They're called GTINs, Global Trade Identification Numbers, and those item numbers are public today. They're like the item numbers you would see on UPC codes on products that you buy. But that was one requirement that was going to have to be figured out. The second requirement that came out of those industry specifications were being able to handle the complexities as molecules are sold from one company to another. So the merger and acquisition activity, how would you be able to handle as a molecule is sold and that item number now needs to go to a different owner? And finally, the large wholesalers have really enormous operations that really run like freight trains, and speed and security were really critical. And so they couldn't have verifications that required hours or days before they would get an answer. They actually requested of the solutions to be able to have an answer back from a barcode scan in less than a second. So the speed to ensure that they could just put that product right back into commerce was going to be critical to allow these operations to continue. So that was the problem. Let me now walk you through how we've designed a blockchain-based product verification solution that's being used by the industry today. So it starts, as we mentioned, with a permission network. Companies are onboarded with their identity, and manufacturers now are onboarded with their GS1 company prefix. That number is actually embedded in their GTIN, their product item number. The manufacturers now put their GTINs on the blockchain ledger in the clear so everyone can read them. They're also going to put a verification endpoint, an IP address of effectively where to send a message to request information about that product. If you could almost imagine, it's like a product and each product has its own little phone number. So the solution already, as you can see from our capabilities, has verified trading partners, you know who's putting the information on, and we're already doing our first business rule enforcement. The blockchain is going to check, do you control this GS1 company prefix that's in that GTIN number? And if you don't, you're not allowed to put that data onto the blockchain. So manufacturers now are controlling the data that's put on, and everyone else knows only the actual manufacturer can do that data posting. So they know the data is coming from the true source. Now, this GTIN and verification endpoint, this phone number, can be uploaded to the distributor's private node. And they now have a full industry phone book so that when they do their barcode scan in their warehouse, it can now connect to their private node, and private messaging routes the message to the manufacturer's database, checks the data elements are authentic, and answers back in less than a second. So this is how the solution works to ensure that drugs can be verified. Let's again go through some of the other capabilities. First of all, perfect data alignment. You know everyone has the exact same set of GTINs and verification endpoints. They're updated continuously as manufacturers are updating information about their products. The records on the blockchain ledger are unchangeable. So you know everyone is both following the same rules and that everyone is honoring the GTINs that are posted. We often get questions of, well, what if information about that product changes? Actually, the blockchain can be changed, again, only by the manufacturer who controls that molecule, and it appends the record. So the solution will work to look at the latest record about that product, but the history of all the other product changes stays on the blockchain. No one can go back and sort of erase history, but everyone knows they're working from the latest authentic data. The real-time private messaging between parties we described earlier is now possible. That verification request and response is seen by nobody except the manufacturer and distributor associated with the actual verification request and response. And all that data and business privacy is aligned. So I think I've hit upon all of them. Maybe one last exciting business rule enforcement has to do with the merger and acquisition activity. What if Pfizer sells a molecule to Novartis? Today, that G10 will actually take probably a year to change. So even though Novartis owns and controls that molecule, it's still going to have a Pfizer number on it. Well, we've designed business rule enforcement on the blockchain that allows Pfizer to transfer ownership to Novartis on the blockchain and for Novartis to accept ownership on the blockchain. Now, all the companies in the MediLedger network would recognize that the molecule is managed by Novartis, even though the G10 still looks like a Pfizer G10 and has the Pfizer company prefix. We can allow the permission in those exceptions for Novartis to now control and make all the changes to the business data about that product going forward until they've changed the packaging and it would switch to a Novartis G10 identifier. So
Suzanne, there's a quick question that, a quick question that I thought would be relevant here. Can you talk through a little bit about how we're planning and are scaling this solution in terms of the number of verifications once it gets really large and how it stays under a reasonable amount of time, under 1 second ideally, and just sort of how we're thinking about that?
It's a great question. I think a lot of people, when they think of blockchain, view it as a place to store data and remove data. If you actually look at this diagram, the private messaging that takes place between the distributor and manufacturer has no interaction with the blockchain. The blockchain in this solution is really being used to hold the master data. In the United States, our estimate is probably about 60,000 G10s exist. So those 60,000 G10s will be loaded. Actually, over half of them are already loaded into the production network already, and we expect the rest of them to be loaded later this summer as we approach compliance with the law later this year. So those 60,000 records, if you can imagine, have weeks or months to be loaded into the system. When the actual verifications ramp up, and we're estimating the number of verifications per year will be in the neighborhood of about 60 million. Those now rely effectively on secure internet. So as fast as the internet can handle request and response is how fast this private messaging will be able to transfer. Our estimates are for, again, the pace of that 60 million that would happen every day. The volume of transactions is really, really low. I apologize, I don't have the math on the top of my head, but we don't expect there to be any issue to be able to maintain that sub-second request and response. So what business problems are solved here? Let's start that G10 sharing is fully controlled by the manufacturer. Everyone who participates in the network knows that they are the only party who can create that data and append that data. We've also been able to solve the mergers and acquisition scenarios that have complexities. We can allow a company to do all the legal paperwork necessary for Pfizer to come into the system and say, I'm transferring ownership to Novartis, and for Novartis to hit the button in their system and say, we're accepting that transfer of ownership. The industry can accept that that change of ownership has happened and is valid because of the verified trading partners that are the only ones who are allowed to do those transactions in the system. And finally, based on that question, we're able to demonstrate that sub-second private verification can happen. And again, we really have no concerns as the volume of transactions continues to grow because there really is no interaction with the blockchain on the immediate request and response of those verifications. So now I'd like to jump to our contract and chargeback solution and describe what's happening here and how these capabilities are enabling it to solve business problems that weren't solvable before. Really quickly, for those less familiar, prescription medicines in the United States today are sold from a manufacturer to a wholesaler at list price. As shown here in the diagram, wholesale acquisition price, let's say we're going to use hypothetically, is $100. Well, hospitals and pharmacies have negotiated better prices through contracts often through group purchasing organizations. So let's say for this drug, the negotiated price is actually $60. The wholesaler will sell to the hospital at the $60 price, and then will ask the manufacturer for the difference to make themselves whole. In this case, it would be $40. They would request a $40 chargeback claim from the manufacturer, who, when all goes well, would pay them, and everyone is made whole. The dilemma is there are a lot of pain points in today's process. If you can imagine companies updating their systems independently with a lot of data changes that are happening all the time. It could be that contract and customer data don't match between partners. Prices are updated. Who's eligible for what contract can change on a daily basis as hospitals and clinics change their formation. Companies can move from one GPO to another, which means they need to be removed from those contracts and put into new contracts. They can change wholesalers. All those data updates need to take place, and everyone's data is frankly updated in a silo independently today, frankly, the exact same data. And then the hope is they're all updating at the same time and accurately, and that's not always the case. We've also found in our exploration that business rules today, as I mentioned earlier, require manual enforcement. There are not necessarily computer systems between companies that can ensure that their contract terms or rules are enforced together. And the fact is, everyone has unique rules with their trading partners. So this business rule enforcement becomes really difficult to do. And because of the misalignment of both rules and data, a lot of chargeback disputes result, which takes a lot of energy and effort on everyone's part to resolve. And everyone has a vested interest to make them go away. So how does our solution work? We've designed a blockchain-based network that allows companies to sit in a network together, as we've described already, with access to a blockchain interface and a blockchain shared ledger that everyone can contribute to and pull data from, as well as private messaging between parties. The first thing we've done is we've defined the interfaces and integrations to existing public data that can be pushed now real time to all participants. This includes the HIBIC, DEA, and HRSA databases, and there are additional databases that we're continuing to progress and integrate with on an ongoing basis as those databases play a role in defining customers and defining eligibility. All the companies now know that they're operating from the exact same data. This speaks to the capability of the perfect data alignment. This may seem like not a big deal, but they're actually different versions of DEA databases that companies pull from, and actually different versions of a HIBIC database that companies can pull from. This ensures that everyone's operating from the same data, and maybe subtle, that you know everyone's operating from the same data that you're operating from, that everyone has the same record. As we've talked about before, the capabilities of the verified trading partner, who you know who you're getting messages from and who you're sending them to, enables this real-time private messaging between parties. So now, as a GPO updates its roster, it can send real-time those updates to the manufacturer and distributor. The manufacturer can now assess any changes in those customer records against their existing customer records and automate the determination of eligibility. One of the things that we think is super exciting is with the database connections and frankly the connections with their trading partners, we can ensure everyone's talking about the same customer, and the manufacturer can choose to automate an eligibility assessment against the entire GPO roster. Today, manufacturers predominantly only assess customer eligibility of customers that have bought products from them. This could represent actually a small fraction of the roster, but distributors struggle because customers come who want to buy products who are brand new, and they're gonna have to play a game to guess that eligibility and then send the chargeback back to the manufacturer. And the manufacturer will then go through a manual eligibility assessment and determine if they're eligible or not. This is one of the pain points that does cause disputes in the industry. The manufacturer now, with all this connected data, can do a full eligibility assessment on the entire GPO roster that's really big. Now, it doesn't mean that they have to say that those customers are eligible, but they can use it in a couple ways. If bold enough, they could actually send that information to the distributor and say, I will honor this eligibility based on this assessment. And I'll comment here, every manufacturer determines eligibility in their own way. So we've created a rules engine that can be customized for each manufacturer to be able to do that. So manufacturers could send that information to the distributor. Conversely, they could send the eligibility assessment to the distributor and maybe say, this is our best guess based on our automated assessment. This gives you better information to determine if you should sell this drug to this customer at this price, but we're still going to do a rapid assessment when you do the chargeback to double check that eligibility, because those customer records aren't in our master data. And finally, if a manufacturer doesn't even want to share that information with the distributor, they can still use that rules engine to run a very rapid eligibility assessment so that when a distributor does sell to a customer that they've never sold to before, the manufacturer can take what could take hours or days and turn it into seconds to do that eligibility determination. Now, when that information is sent to the distributor, when the distributor goes to sell drugs to a customer, they will now be checking against the blockchain, am I selling at the current eligibility and current pricing? And if those rules are valid, the chargeback gets sent to the manufacturer immediately, and the manufacturer has guaranteed to honor the latest state of the contract that's stored here on the blockchain. So let's walk through some of those capabilities. We've already touched upon verified trading partners, real-time messaging, perfect data alignment. The unchangeable records ensures that everyone is working against the same data on the blockchain. The manufacturer has stored a proof every time any updates to the contract are made, pricing or eligibility. That's what the distributor is checking against. And the distributor knows that no one else can change that record except the manufacturer. The business rule enforcement takes place in a lot of places here. As data is being sent between parties, we can now check, is the GPO's membership roster, are the license numbers accurate? Is the DEA license active? If those rules are not being met, those records can be stopped at the GPO's wall and asked to fix before they send it on to the manufacturer. The chargeback that the distributor is sending, is this the right price and eligibility? That transaction can be stopped until those rules are met. So now everyone is operating from the same data. They have visibility ahead of time of who's eligible, and they can be assured that the data is being kept accurate, aligned, and private as well. So a lot of capabilities being used here in the chargeback solution. And what does this now solve? All parties are operating from the same data. As I stated, they know they're operating from the same data. You know that your trading partner's data is correct before it even gets to you because of the rules that have been enforced. Parties know immediately when data or transactions are incorrect. In today's world that uses EDI, often the EDIs are batched overnight, and the receiving party may take that day to process that information, and it may take 24 or even 48 hours or longer to send the information back that the data or transactions were not valid or accepted. Literally, as the data transaction and transmission is taking place, the companies will be notified immediately if the rules are not being met. That value of real-time information is hugely valuable. And then the dispute auditing and validating that is required in today's world will be drastically reduced because the rules that are encoded here on the blockchain are guaranteed. And everyone knows that no one can independently change the rules without everyone else participating in those rule changes.
Quick question, Suzanne, before you move on. Could you clarify the status of maybe these first two use cases? Are they live? How far along are they into production?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So our product verification solution is in production. All the nodes are up and running, and additional companies are continuing to join, and nodes are being added. Production transactions are taking place, though the industry is still working to prepare for, I would say, the full use of the solution because the regulation doesn't take effect until November this year. So wholesalers are targeting this summer, assuming they can get into their warehouses due to COVID restrictions, to finalize the training. But all the system integrations have been done and tested. I do believe there is still some additional testing being done by the HDA on behalf of the industry, but they are in production. Our contract and chargeback solution, we're super excited that the production software has been released. The companies that we have been working with have set up their integrations and are doing the testing right now of the solution with the expectation that production contract updating will start later this year, probably in beginning of Q4. And then the actual automated chargebacks will follow slowly after that. We have a phase 1 and phase 2. But these are not proof of concepts. These are real live production solutions integrated to companies' true core systems and contract management systems. And we're really excited that this will help take those data and those systems and make them work even better for the companies.
One other question on the chargebacks topic. Is class of trade maintained in the blockchain? Or if so, how is it determined and how are we benefiting that process?
Yeah, so what we learned, we understood and learned even more is class of trade is a super complex process, and every manufacturer defines class of trade in their own unique way. There's certainly a lot of things that are unified, but that the industry was really going to need the ability to define class of trade uniquely, and that eligibility assessment might go well beyond just class of trade. So by integrating to the databases that are used to help determine that class of trade and eligibility, all companies are now operating from the same data set. What we understood as well, as even though the GPOs do a assessment of what class of trade can be, the manufacturer really is the final word of that class of trade and eligibility assessment. So our solution allows a manufacturer to do that assessment, again, automatically now. That doesn't take individual effort anymore. We can literally do the entire roster, and they're going to communicate that information to both the GPO and the distributor well ahead of any sale of product. So if there is disagreement about that eligibility assessment, both GPOs and distributors can work with a manufacturer to understand that disagreement well ahead of the sale, so that when the sale happens, it happens smoothly. Honestly, once money gets involved, you don't want the dispute happening then. It's much better to have that discussion ahead of time and gain that alignment, and our solution provides that visibility to enable that to happen.
Excellent, thanks so much. We got a few other questions coming in. We'll definitely make sure to address them in the final Q&A. Appreciate all the engagement. We'll sort of, I think, have a few more use cases here. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Yeah, so now we wanted to move forward to having now talked through these capabilities and how it actually solves real business problems. We've already looked ahead to the future of what other problems can be solved, and certainly welcome other people's ideas of how that's possible. Many of you may have seen that the MediLedger Network, based on our interactions with our working groups and information from the industry, we've tried to map out future use cases that we can build or other solution providers can build to provide capabilities for companies. Certainly, as we look at the Drug Supply Chain Security Act, there's going to be need for an electronic interoperable system to help manage the track and trace in 2023. You can see that here. And our primary focus have been supply chain and revenue management use cases. So let me talk through a couple of them. So first, that 2023 track and trace solution, we've built the prototype. We conducted a pilot based on the call from FDA for pilots last year, and we're really appreciative of all the companies that participated to kick the tires on what an interoperable solution could look like and how the industry could adopt such a solution. The exciting thing is it could solve business problems to not only meet the letter of the law, but frankly, the spirit of the law. We believe that it could actually eliminate counterfeit drugs from the United States supply chain. We could catch diversion real time as it's happening. Companies can ensure authenticity of a product without requiring full provenance. A lot of people, when they talk about blockchain, talk about full transparency. But frankly, in this industry, the information of the movement of drugs is actually quite valuable. And it isn't information that companies necessarily want to share. So we've designed a solution that when a drug shows up at a pharmacy, they can scan that product and actually be given, if you could imagine, a green check mark. They know that the product is authentic, but it doesn't need to reveal the full provenance of where that drug has been. And we think that's an exciting prospect. But that said, with all these connections in a network, no more point-to-point integrations required. This can actually enable direct data sharing about transactions, about inventory, if businesses want to make those business arrangements with each other to share that data. Another future use case that we think is exciting are GPO admin fees. Today, GPOs collect admin fees based on how often the contract prices they've negotiated are actually utilized. Today, that process is not fully automated and requires a lot of audits and dispute resolution between parties. It's not an easy or pretty process, but we can fully automate that. Now, if we have the chargebacks that are being operated on the blockchain, we can take that data and enable a fully automated fee calculation and payment schedule based on whatever algorithms are actually used. Is it just straight contract prices? Is there tier pricing? All of that becomes possible. We can actually automate all the auditing via those blockchain records, so manual audits are no longer required or incredibly lightened for what they have to, what they are today. And GPOs and wholesalers can know that they're operating from identical records, that disputes or issues can literally go back to the same data set that's shared between parties to ensure that everyone's operating from the same information. Another use case, which we think starts the real excitement, which is combining data sources now between different use cases to enable capabilities that weren't possible before, is really highlighted here in serialized chargebacks. So drugs will start moving through the US supply chain after 2023 at a serialized unit level, right? Every box of medicine has a unique serial number now, and the actual movement in commerce will be enabled by the law. Today's chargeback processes happen at an invoice level. And honestly, with the level of disputes and manual effort, there's no way it would even be possible to handle the volume that would come from trying to manage at a serialized unit level. But the solution we're building today, we actually think can be leveraged quite easily with our solutions that are connected to the serialized data to enable serialized chargebacks and let the computers do the work for the companies. What business problems can that solve? We believe that it will eliminate revenue leakage and any double dipping that's taking place between parallel transactions against that individual unit. It can be used to ensure 340B inventory enforcement in the future. And we're really excited because I think this is an example of combining data sets in a way that wasn't possible today. And frankly, with today's systems would be really difficult to manage to enable capabilities that aren't possible at all. And maybe if I really look at value to patients in the future, value-based contracts is immensely exciting. Payers are developing pay-for-performance contracts with manufacturers today. Any of you involved in cell therapies know this. Cell therapies are honestly in the hundreds of patients, and it does require some manual activity as well as intermediaries who are holding data for companies, and is currently probably limited to extremely high-value drugs. But what if in the future we can integrate all these data sets, work with payers to integrate against patient health data along with the manufacturers and contract terms, so that as a patient, let's say, stays in remission for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, the manufacturer can be compensated based on that performance of that drug. We can fully automate those payments across any time frame. Again, auditing can become very automated via the blockchain records so that it becomes very easy to do. And similar to the other example, payers and manufacturers know they're operating from identical records, so any dispute management is honestly really rapidly reconciled. So we think something that today is very complex could actually be put into place for really broader reaching drugs and really put the manufacturers on the hook to ensuring their drugs are delivering value to patients, and conversely, for those manufacturers that have risen to that, for them to be able to be compensated for that. I know a lot of you are working in other parts of the industry, and we didn't want to leave out the fact that we know our focus is on a couple specific areas. But when I look at the life science and healthcare industry, there are other parallel functions that could benefit from these capabilities that can be delivered from blockchain-based solutions. The ability to share clinical trial information, assure the immutability of that clinical trial data. There's some really super exciting work that's taking place in that space. R&D and shared learnings of drug development are an exciting opportunity. And then all the financial transactions between companies. If you imagine in today's world of bookkeeping and double entry bookkeeping, why can't we have, instead of double entry, frankly, move to single entry, because companies now share the same ledger and literally have a shared ledger to be able to ensure all transactions all the way lined up down to a line by line level. We really think the exciting possibility in the finance space is coming and coming soon. There are also parallel industries that MediLedger is starting to explore. Medical surgical supplies also have a chargeback process, and our understanding is the pain points are even greater there than they are on the prescription medicine chargeback. We're looking to kick off that working group later this year. If folks are interested, please let us know if you'd like to participate. There's been a lot of great work in medical device and medical device tracking that can benefit, again, from this rule enforcement that's capable now in blockchain-based solutions. And then the holy grail, patient data and health outcomes. There's a lot of really great companies out there aiming to tackle this. And in our industry, it could prove enormous benefits. But I view it as sort of the highest mountain because the alignment on health outcome standards, tremendous amount of work has been done with FHIR and other standards, but it's really the hardest area. And my hat's off to those folks who are doing that work. And we certainly hope to integrate and connect as appropriate as those solutions evolve. So that was our quick tour of how we think capabilities are now existing by using blockchain-based networks that weren't possible before. And I really welcome any additional questions from the crowd. Just want to highlight real quickly to thank you for joining our webinar today and let you know that our next webinar is scheduled for beginning of September, where we actually want to have a cafe. We get lots of questions on all sorts of topics and would love to have a live group discussion on blockchain in the life sciences and open questions people have, maybe a little bit of a debate. So hope you can join us in September. And with that, Mike, I'll hand over to you to see if there are additional questions that we have from the crowd.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the patience of those who asked questions earlier. Sort of the topics bounced around, so I just wanted to sort of stay focused, but a lot of good questions here. So the first one I wanted to bring up was around the blockchain and how blocks are actually being produced. Are there specific nodes that are producing them? Is MediLedger producing them? How are new transactions added to the blockchain?
Yeah, so the MediLedger Network is designed that companies or solution providers of their choice are running the nodes in the network. Chronicled is running a node in the product verification network to enable the interoperability with other solutions outside the network. But in the chargeback solution, as an example, it's really the companies themselves running the nodes. We are using a proof of authority consensus. We're using a light consensus because the companies are all known and semi-trusted, and that actually puts their reputation on the line. And so would be looking to the companies to run that consensus and post the transactions. And the intention is in the future, then that could rotate between the companies running nodes.
Excellent. The technology behind our network, is it Ethereum, Hyperledger, Sawtooth, something else?
Yeah, so we've built our solution on initially Parity's Ethereum client, and our chargeback solution is built on parity substrate. Substrate, we think, has a lot of really exciting opportunities of future interoperability. We are not currently associated with the Polkadot network, but certainly want to keep our eyes to that future interoperability between other blockchain solutions as well. But we are built on open source substrate in a permission network.
Excellent. And also, how does a manufacturer, and I think this is going back to the product verification solution, how does a manufacturer that maybe only has a handful of GTINs get their information on MediLedger?
Yeah, so we have companies themselves running nodes on product verification. We also have a whole set of solution providers who help companies manage their serial numbers, who can also provide an avenue. They would actually host the node on behalf of, let's say, small manufacturers, and can provide the access and portal to connect their serial numbers to the product verification network. So if companies are smaller, maybe they're managing the serial numbers on their own, I suggest they call us and we can connect them with one of the solution providers who could help them get connected.
Yep, and Suzanne's email is there on the slide if you want to make note and send us an email after. Yeah, we'd be happy to help. The next question is going back to the contracts and chargebacks, and I think it actually touches on a point that is great to re-highlight. The question is, if I load my contract pricing into the blockchain, how is it kept private only between the manufacturer and selected trading partners?
It's a great question. So we use cryptography called zero knowledge proofs. So by design, as I mentioned earlier, we will not let any private information appear in the clear on the blockchain. Obviously, that's a non-starter for companies to participate. So if it's necessary, we use zero knowledge proofs. And what makes them special is it puts a cryptographic proof on the blockchain, an alphanumeric string that cannot be reverse engineered, but allows the companies who participate in that transaction to check against that proof with the data that they have. So they have to have the price information already. They can check, is this price, is this eligibility still valid? And it's that check against the proof that ensures that no data is revealed to anyone else, but ensures that the rules are being met before that chargeback gets sent back to the manufacturer. In today's world, manufacturers do share pricing with distributors. That happens in that private peer-to-peer message between parties, but the proof is checked against the blockchain because the blockchain ensures that no one has changed the rules and that the manufacturer, what they're posting there, has to be honored. So it's that construct of privacy that we use to ensure that no business intelligence like pricing is revealed to anyone who should have no business in that information.
Absolutely, yeah. I think it's a great example of how private data can be incorporated in essentially the same way as public data. And so when you're looking at use cases in your company, it's there's no restrictions there. Another question that came up is US versus global use cases. A lot of what we talked about today was obviously focused on the US, but some of it isn't. Do we plan to expand beyond the US?
Yeah, so we've designed, let's say, our supply chain and track and trace use cases, as I mentioned, against GS1 standards. Again, kudos to the industry for all the work they've done to implement these standards, and those standards are global. The reason we have not forged ahead in other countries is because those laws in those countries have mandated slightly different approaches. But we believe, if I could aspire and look ahead, track and trace of medicines around the world, I would say ideally it would be very exciting to connect the appropriate blockchains, or if really there was interest in a single blockchain, such that the rules of drugs in different countries are honored, and that the ability to catch materials and drugs that are showing up in countries where they don't belong could be caught and enforced immediately. So absolutely, based on the way it's designed, it has global applicability. But there are, let's say, I'll say countries that really desperately need it, like in Africa, where there's a lot of counterfeit. There are not as mature serialization laws in place yet. Other countries like Europe have mandated central databases, so they're managing through that today. But I think the conversation can continue to grow in other parts of the world to provide the connectivity, whether it's the MediLedger Network expands or solutions from other regions of the world connect to our work. We're super excited at those possibilities.
And then another question, most of the use cases that we're working on seem to be towards the end of the value chain. What about the beginning around relationships with contract manufacturers and beginning stages of molecule development and things like that?
Yeah, so we highlighted them, and there are definitely some great companies out there working on some components of that. We're really taking the lead from the companies we're working with where their pain points are. It is complex to bring companies together and agree upon protocols. So really, I would say a pull from the industry and their pain points is sort of a critical component of that. But the question is exactly right. I think raw material management, quality standards around raw materials, and certainly upstream in R&D and drug development, there are a lot of really exciting opportunities. So my summary here today is not in any way to preclude the value proposition that those solutions provide. I would say we're just tackling them sort of, at least from Chronicled's perspective, one at a time. And certainly would be excited if there are opportunities with others who have great use cases and would benefit from participating in a platform that's connecting these companies to see how that might be possible.
Absolutely. And then outside of pharma and life sciences, other industries, and we talked about this a little bit at the end, maybe there's something you can re-highlight and expand a bit on where else it could go.
Yeah, so Chronicled has been exploring other industries for quite a number of years. Certainly when I look at the chargeback solution that we're doing, it's effectively a rebate, and there are rebates in a lot of industries. Automotive industry has a lot of rebates. Chemicals industries have a lot of rebates. So I think those are exciting opportunities to bring companies together and create value. Just had a great conversation about, again, the quality of raw materials and how, as raw materials pass from one party to another, how those quality checks can be done automatically to assure the raw materials, whether they're end materials or intermediates, are meeting the requirements that are mandated. So certainly a lot of exciting other comparable use cases in other industries. There's a lot to tackle and there's a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to even add on to that, it's difficult to, just the solution solving problems in an industry is a small part of the battle. Is actually getting companies together is a bigger challenge. And so there's a lot of things that need to sort of be in place to actually start something in an industry and develop commercial solutions, going from start to finish. Another question was around Amazon. Obviously, there's a lot happening with them in the news, and in particular, the pharma industry. They are increasingly developing their market share in the pharmacy side of things. I believe PillPack is one of their main brands. How does that factor into the solution? Are they a GPO? Do we know anything about their process?
Yeah, so Amazon, I think it's clear from the news, is really excited to help disrupt on a lot of levels, right? They're looking at it from the insurance for their employees all the way to the delivery of online prescription medicines. However, they'll be required to comply with the law, just like everybody else. So to note, the Drug Supply Chain Security Act says that dispensers will need to verify suspect product later this year. And so they will, I think, have to comply. I would say if I had to pick, as much as I would say their volumes are very small today, I guess they would be viewed as a dispenser and could play a role in the industry like that. Certainly, there are a lot of components to the supply chain. Last I checked, Amazon is not manufacturing prescription medicines, so they really would have to play a role in the entire ecosystem that is the same as the role that other companies need to play today.
Excellent. And then have we engaged at all with PBMs, the pharmacy benefit managers? Are there any actively participating What's the status on that side?
So I've had some great conversations with PBMs, with all pieces of the supply chain. I think, as sort of Mike, you alluded to earlier, identifying a use case and pain points is really critical to bring the parties that work in a multi-party process together and define benefit for all of them. Certainly on the PBM side, my understanding is pharmacy claims are not smooth sailing. And disputes end up there. So certainly would welcome conversations with PBMs to explore, can we design a solution that really benefits all parties involved, and continue to drive that. PBMs kind of sit in the middle, so they're ripe, I think, again, in this multi-party environment to see what might be potential benefits for them participating in such a network.
Excellent. We're out of time. There's one last question, though, I think it's worth bringing up, but I obviously apologize for going over here, but this will be the last one. How are differences in rule proposals resolved in the consortium, in the working group? Do larger participants have more pull? What are the dynamics like? And also, is government involved at all?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. And the answer is absolutely not. We can't have solutions designed that bigger players have more pull. So we've actually been really thoughtful in how we design our solutions. And frankly, in the 4 years we've been doing this, we have, I think by my record, only had one dispute that was difficult to resolve, because really the solution is designed at an almost improved plumbing level. So there's really nothing contentious in the designs. No one is provided a benefit. We really ensure that neutrality so that all companies can operate and compete fairly with each other. So thanks for that question. That's fantastic.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, everyone. We really hope you can join us at our next event on September 1st. It should be a very exciting and new dynamic to get people in the audience involved and hopefully have a lively discussion on some of the topics here. So thank you again. And really appreciate you guys joining us today.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.